All right, I'm going to call the May 7th Raytown Board of Aldermen Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 6:06 p.m. And Ms. Henry, if you would call the roll, please.
Alderman Walters.
Here.
Alderman Scott. Alderman Azier. Alderman Hayden.
Here.
Alderman Myers.
Here.
Alderman Emerson.
Here.
Alderman Garza.
Here.
Alderman Van Buskirk.
Here.
Alderman Mims.
Present.
Alderman Krizak.
Oh. Here. Here. Is that an echo?
We have a quorum. All right. Approval of the April 16, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. Do I hear a motion? I heard from two sides here. I'm going to give it to Ms. Hayden in first, second, Ms. Mims. Any conversation? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Alderman Hayden.
Yes.
Alderman Mims.
Yes.
Alderman Scott.
I think he's still trying to get on.
Alderman Krizak.
Yes.
Alderman Emerson.
Yes.
Alderman Van Buskirk.
Yes.
Alderman Walters.
Yes.
Alderman Myers.
Yes.
Alderman Garza.
Yes.
Alderman Azier. Let's see here.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Okay, next is KCATA Presentation-Ridership. Missy Wilson, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Mayor. At the previous meeting, you all approved an extension of a contract that was only a 2-month contract because KCATA and Kansas City were in negotiations on certain matters. So we are updating you on that because it has an impact on the potential future ridership in Raytown. Let me get the system to work here. Worked in practice. There we go. So, Kansas City, Missouri notified ATA that July 1st of 2024, Kansas City will no longer fund their portion of the Flex 399, which is about 30% of the total route service cost. If Raytown would like to pick up 100% of that cost, that would be at the service fees of $123,759. That cost is after you deduct the federal and state potential resources. It is also calculated on the miles driven within Raytown and the total hours that it takes to drive that route. And also assuming that ATA does not change their fee structure. Right now it is a zero fare fee structure. What is being proposed as an option for consideration is the program they call IRIS. I'm going to touch on it real quickly, and then Bryce Shields with ATA is here to give you a more in-depth comparison conversation about the two different services. This is a new app that is based on demand. It's a partnership with ATA and KCMO. This service would allow our Flex, now currently Flex riders, a greater area to be transported to within the cities of Gladstone, Riverside, Liberty, and of course Kansas City, Missouri. We will be the first community in eastern Jackson County to participate in this, and then as the program expanded, we would already be in the door, and we would just be able to give our riders additional areas to go. The annual cost right now estimated is to the city of Raytown would be $84,000. I've got a comparison for you on your third slide, but I'm going to let Bryce come up and give you the detailed conversation on it. And I'm going to move this little icon out of his way there. So,
good evening, Board and Mayor. Welcome back, or I'm back. So yeah, I wanted to show some of the comparisons between Iris and Flex. I'm not recommending one or the other, just showing the differences here. So first off, Flex currently operates Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. and then 2:30 to 6:30 p.m. in the evenings. It is a 24 hours call in advance service. It is door to door, or technically curb to curb, excuse me. So that means you put in your exact address of pickup and your exact address of drop off, and it takes you to those exact locations. There's currently not a fare on it, and it is, again, it is operated by a cutaway bus, which you may see, like you see in the airports, kind of a truck front and a bus back. We call those cutaways. Iris is a new service that we are managing. It is operated by WHC or Z-Trip, managed by the KCATA in partnership with Kansas City. It is an on-demand service, averaging about 15 minutes from when you hail a ride to when it's get picked up. It flows throughout communities. So right now it operates, as you mentioned, Kansas City, Missouri, Gladstone, Riverside, Liberty, and if you guys were to choose to use the service, it would operate here as well.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, sir, could you speak up a little bit?
Oh, yes, my apologies. Yep, I'm happy
Get a
to.
little bit close to the microphone and maybe slow down just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Thank you.
So Iris operates 6 a.m. 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. and operates 7 days a week. We used to have it originally 24 hours a day, but we were running it at 2 a.m. and there was absolutely nobody riding, and so it just was money being spent for no reason. So we reduced it and there wasn't any complaints. So 6 to 11 has been about what's working well for it. It operates on a quarter-mile basis. So what that means is if you put in your pickup location, it's going to give you what we call a virtual stop that is going to be within a quarter mile of your pickup location, where you physically are at that moment. And then you put in your destination, and it's going to drop you off within a quarter mile at a different virtual stop. Now, a quarter mile is the max. On average, we're averaging 500 feet from your requested pickup location and your requested drop-off location. But a quarter mile is the absolute max. Those virtual stops are laid into the system by an algorithm operated by our software provider, Rideco. We can also manually add stops. So if there is a place that gets skipped, like for some reason Walmart doesn't have a stop, that we can go back in physically into the system and add a virtual stop. The fare structure works currently in Kansas City. Kansas City has 3 zones. And so if you stay within a zone, your fare is $3. If you leave that zone and go into a different zone, that becomes a $4 fare. And that's also per person, by the way. So a little bit different than like an Uber, where you're paying for the car, you're paying per person with Iris. Communities outside of KCMO, we've given them the option if they want to charge a fare or not, as long as they're staying within their community. So for example, Gladstone has chosen to be no fare as long as the Iris trip stays within Gladstone, and Liberty has chosen to charge a $3 fare for trips within Liberty. However, if somebody in those communities leaves that zone, they then fall into the KCMO fare structure. It is operated by a car or a van. It is ADA compliant, so if somebody has a wheelchair or needs an ADA accessible vehicle, they can mark that on the app, and those are accessible. I welcome any questions regarding to the 2 services.
All right, you guys questions?
Could you tell me more about the airport?
Oh, excuse me. We also have an airport fee, specifically $10 to the airport using Iris. It does have to be booked at a minimum of 3 hours in advance. It's a little bit different than the rest of it that's on demand.
Mr. Waller?
Thank you. Okay, so if I understand this correctly, to get the service that we currently have along Blue Ridge is $84,000.
So this is specifically this would replicate the Flex service. Those are the best way to compare them. So the Flex is your on-demand, 24 hours in advance service where somebody can get picked up anywhere inside Raytown and get dropped off somewhere else in Raytown, door to door.
I understand that for the Iris section, but that's a...
No, sir, Blue Ridge is a whole different conversation we'll have after we finish
Okay,
this
but
one.
I want to make sure that we're understanding that there are 2 different fees here that we're speaking.
Yes, that is correct.
One's $84,000, which is that's the Iris section,
That's,
and the other one, which we currently have. Now, so in other words, you got a total of a half mile you could end up walking if you're serviced with this?
That is the max potential between your pickup and your drop-off, which again, we're averaging 500 feet your walking distance.
How much transportation do we have now with people that are using the pickup service or whatever this is replacing?
So Flex, I believe the last time I pulled it was averaging per quarter about 1,700 rides for the entire quarter. So that's 3 months worth of service.
1,700 in Raytown only?
So that's technically 1,700 because the Flex, the perimeter on Flex, if you look at the map here, That's about 65% inside Raytown and 35% goes into KCMO. Specifically, like Blue Ridge Crossing, that area up there was inside the flex zone.
The flex does not include anything along Blue Ridge?
Well, the border of the flex expands past Blue Ridge currently a little bit. Actually, I think it goes to the border of Blue Ridge, excuse me.
So people, otherwise, they were having to come to the bus stop to be picked up on the flex, am I correct?
No, so flex is a door-to-door, so you would put in your specific address, and it would take you, or it would pick you up at your specific address.
And they would pick up at the house?
Yes,
Okay, they didn't have to be within a quarter of a mile to be picked up?
they did not.
Okay, so the service is not, it's going to be a lot more walking than before.
Again, we're averaging 500 feet, but that is part of the cost savings aspect of it, is that it doesn't go that last quarter mile, which does, when you do door-to-door service, that does add up surprisingly on the cost. So that's part of the cost-saving method of Iris, is that it doesn't do that final quarter mile.
Okay, the 399 service is costing us $123,759.
That is the proposed cost, a 12-month cost based on our new.
And the flex service on top of the $84,000 more?
So the flex is $123,000 versus potentially Iris, which is $84,000.
So it's either or.
Either or. I suppose you could fund
It's
both.
not, it's not both, it's either or.
Yeah, either or.
Okay, the Iris is the $84,000,
Yes, that is correct.
and that includes the service that we currently have along Blue Ridge Cutoff?
That does not include the fixed route services.
Okay, what
That's
does
it.
that cost us?
We'll cover that in a minute. That's a whole different conversation, and we'll get to that in a minute. This
Well,
is,
coming from the same pot, but I'll be patient.
I understand, but we don't want to confuse the on-demand service from the fixed bus routes. And what you keep asking about along Blue Ridge is what is deemed a fixed bus route.
Yes.
So we'll get back to that in just a minute. We kind of need to flush out everybody else's questions about the on-demand service here. So that's the reason I'd like to clarify that first.
Okay,
Ms. Hayden,
On the pickup and drop-off locations, I understand that you're saying that no greater than a quarter of a mile. So how do you decide where that pickup is? Is it like at a gas station or?
They're oftentimes at street corners. So for example, with my house in KCMO, I live right in the middle of a block, and then if I go use the app, which I do oftentimes, I have two virtual stop options, and I get to pick. So I either have one based on both sides of my block. They're both at the corners, like at intersections.
Okay, so you're basically walking to the corner of wherever you're living,
More or less, yeah.
or more or less, okay. And then my other question is, so this Iris, though, how do you, if a senior or a disabled person has to walk a quarter of a mile, 4 blocks, I mean, do you consider if they're a senior citizen or a handicapped person if we go with this Iris, or do they plug in their stuff electronically? Is there an option to say, I'm a senior citizen, I'm in a wheelchair, I need wheelchair accessibility?
Those are options you can put in the app. I apologize because I haven't personally used that aspect. I don't really know what occurs, but I know we've built that functionality in to account for people with that need. Again, I apologize. I don't know specifics of how that operates at that point, but I know that's something that our designers specifically took into account.
But you do know for sure that's on there?
Right, because you can go in
Try
and you
to
can, like,
accommodate those people?
right.
Okay. All right, and then my other question, so it says the vehicle type is a car or van, so will it have Z-Trip on there so the people will know that this is an Iris pickup? I mean, how do you identify that? Because we don't want our folks getting into the car.
Right, absolutely. So all the Z-Trip vehicles that are being used for Iris services will have the Iris emblem on them, generally in a visible area. Some of them are completely wrapped with the Iris logo. Some of them have it more just a large sticker on the side. And they also still say Z-Trip on them as well. But they are identified.
yeah, I've seen them around town, they're very easily identified,
Okay.
very easily. Anyone else? Bill Van Busker.
Thank you. Okay, you were saying if a person is disabled, they would be able to identify that on the app.
Yes,
That says by app or phone, is that correct? So they could do that by phone as well?
that is correct, yes. Yes, there's also a phone call option And also, I didn't put it on here, but also if somebody doesn't want to use the app, doesn't want to call, there's also a web browser feature as well, so they could be like on a laptop and using that option as well.
I'm glad I put my glasses on when I first looked at this because I didn't see the .25 on that till I put that on. It looked like just 25 miles, but
That'd be a long walk.
I'm glad I did that. Okay. I don't have any further questions right
Okay.
now. Thank you.
Yeah, if nobody's read about this service, the Flex service, a lot of people that I talked to complained about it because of the fact that the way it was set up and how far ahead of time you had to call, say if you had a doctor's appointment, you had to know about it enough ahead of time and all that. It may have been more door to door, but it was more difficult to get a ride when you needed it unless you called way out ahead. And the working poor, as this one lady called herself, she didn't have transportation, so her only way to get to work was through the Flex. And the problem is that sometimes if her hours changed, and there's several others that sat there while I was talking to her and said the same thing, yeah, we have the same problem. If it doesn't, it's hard to get it changed so you're gonna be waiting. With the Iris, you can call and boom, you got a ride. So that's an advantage of that one that I can only think of, that one that's been brought to my attention by those folks, so. Go ahead.
Well, I had, my concerns were for those that like are using the Flex for like their medical appointments and stuff. Because if the Flex doesn't pick them up at a certain time and they miss that appointment, the insurances now are starting to bill them when they mix their rides. And so finding out that they're using the Flex bus and then their ride doesn't get them, but they called in enough time. But then when they're going from 2 or 3 different doctors and they don't get picked up. So do they still have to pay the Flex just like how the insurances are doing them now? When they fail to pick them up?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar. So are you saying that if the Flex fails to pick up, the KCATA currently pays the doctor's appointment fee?
No. What I'm saying is when the person that called for Flex didn't pick them up, is there a fee they still have to pay even though they missed getting picked up?
Oh, no, the person, if they don't get picked up by Iris, which wouldn't occur, but they would not be charged. Yeah. I should also add, kind of Iris, the thing about it is that it's on demand, but you can book in advance as well. So if you know you're going somewhere, you need to be somewhere at 8:30 tomorrow morning, you can book that evening to know you need to get picked up at 7:30 or 8 or whatever.
Okay, but my question that I'm still stuck on is, say for instance, that person had an appointment at 8 that morning, okay? And then the doctors give them another place to go, say like 1:30, 2 o'clock. Are they able to shift over to get a ride to go to that one, which is in Raytown?
Yes, they would book like a new trip on Iris at that point. So like if they paid for the Iris trip in the morning at 8 to go to their doctor, and then their doctor said, I need you to go to this facility at 1, the person would then book a second trip on the Iris service.
Okay.
To then go to that location.
Before you go, I was going to say, can you explain like the amount that we have, the 84,000, is that for a zero fare, or is that for $3 fare within Raytown city limits?
So the way the $7,000 works is because we are building onto latent capacity on the Kansas City, Missouri contract. So Kansas City, Missouri requires that 35 vehicles be on the road at all times. And so currently there isn't enough usership of Iris to use all those vehicles all the time. So the reason the $7,000 price tag is because we're building off that existing vehicle availability. So with the fare, we do give Raytown or any community the option to charge a fare or not. However, that fare would come back to the KCATA to pay against the KCMO contract. That wouldn't affect the $7,000 a month being proposed.
Mr. Myers.
Okay, so basically Iris is 7 days a week, 19 hours a day, $3 Uber, more or less.
It's somewhat similar to if you've ever used a city that has Uber Pool. It's somewhat similar to that.
And then for like that, for an example, my grandmother doesn't even have a cell phone. How do you get around with that if it's app-based?
That would be the call service. So there's a phone number that you can call.
Okay, so it's just call service, hey, come pick me up at X, drop me off here, and we're done.
Yep, and they will walk you through where your stop's going to be and all that information.
Okay.
Ms. Garza?
No, I mean, that's basically what I was going to say, because I was on the Ride KC board when they started talking about the app and changing over under, well, Tyler, I think, was there at that time.
Oh, yeah.
So that was the beginning of the conversation. And basically, my understanding is that it is like the Uber pool. So so they were having so many issues with the flex, and like you said, people not getting to places on time, missing, them running late and behind. So the switch is supposed to be more like Uber, where you call it and it comes right then, versus you having to wait and you having to book it so far in advance.
Explain.
Yes, sir. I was getting ready to finish, but I got a little away from it. My point is here, it's $84,000 that you're asking us for the riders in Raytown, correct?
Correct.
Is that zero fare, or is that an extended fare that they have to pay? And when you were talking about the fare piece over here, the $4 fare, is that within Raytown boundaries, or that's when they go outside of Raytown boundaries? And my next piece is, if they don't have the funding and they call for the flex, are they able to pay, like, for instance, some of them get the check once a month. Are they able to pay a price up front so they can put it in their budget, or they have to pay every time they call for the ride? Because you got a lot of senior citizens, and that's got to be explained to them.
So first off, the fare operates, the $4 fare applies if somebody were to hop on in Raytown and then go to KCMO, so they cross that border into what is a different zone, that's when the $4 fare applies. As regards to the paying and uploading, I don't believe there's a way to load your account up front, but you can pay with credit card or cash on the vehicle as well. So that could be a point of education that we could work on to help educate Raytown riders if you were to choose to go with Iris.
And when will this go in effect? Because I'm going to ride it, just to see just how it's going to operate.
If you guys were to choose to go with Iris, it would go into effect July 1.
Mr. Walters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this service is KCMO, Gladstone, Riverside, and Liberty.
Yes,
Does not service Independence,
not currently.
Lee Summit,
It does not serve Lee Summit.
Blue Springs, anything on the outline?
You would be the first non-KC city in Jackson County to adopt the service.
Okay. What about if you're going to the doctor? Because I know, I don't know where everybody goes to their doctor at, but there's fewer doctors unless you're going to a dentist in Raytown than there were before. Yeah. Most of them are out towards Lee Summit. Many of them are over in Overland Park, over in the Kansas side. Does this service out into that area?
It is not.
It does not? I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of people this will not serve. I'm concerned about that, quite honestly. You say that you had trouble with the flex service because it wasn't getting people places on time, from what Ms. Mims said and so forth. Is that correct?
No.
The flex service.
The flex service, I was asking the question if the party didn't get their ride in time. Not that it's happened, I'm just asking because if it's happened, but not here in Raytown.
I see.
So I'm asking for it because it's going to be in Raytown. Will that happen to some of them? Because the insurances now are billing people when they miss their rides to get to their doctor's appointments. So that's what I'm saying.
I see the flex service really didn't go much further than the Iris says. In fact, it looks like less, if I'm following this map correctly.
Correct. So the flex zone had very specific borders.
Yeah.
So it was only Raytown plus a very small portion of Kansas City, primarily up again at Blue Ridge Crossing.
I'll be honest with you. I see the cities of Gladstone, Riverside, and Liberty. And I myself, I'm not heavy into going to doctors. But I do not see my dentist or my regular doctor. I do in Kansas City on the regular doctor. But on the others, the dentist or any type of specialty work, it's going to take me outside that area. So that means I just have to find another way, call Uber or something like that.
Right. Our biggest service area with Iris right now is Kansas City, Missouri, and it covers the entirety of Kansas City, Missouri. And we're still working on expanding the service out to other communities. But so as the service grows, the Raytown ridership, if they were to use this, would also then gain access to those cities.
I would assume as it grows, we'll also have fewer people riding, or we'll not have as high a cost.
This is the cost I have. I can guarantee right now, I can't guarantee any cost changes in the future. This is what I have guaranteed through October of 2025.
Okay.
Severson.
I don't know whether you really answered this or not, but what about the people that cannot afford to pay the additional money?
So, so inside Raytown, we would give you the option to set the fare to 0. So if you wanted to make sure your citizens, if moving within Raytown, they wouldn't have to pay anything if that was your choice. Outside of that, we don't currently have a service or any kind of thing to fund a discount on Iris, as it is kind of a premium mobility option.
I think something that will help me with that question is explaining how this steps goes. I mean, we mentioned Uber Pool, not many of them have used Uber Pool. So explaining what steps happen, what do you have to do, but do it from the standpoint of a person who may not have an app and who may have an app. Explain it.
So if somebody doesn't have an app, and they know they want to get picked up in an hour, they're going to call the phone number, and they're going to say, I am at this address, and I want to be picked up close to this address, and I'm trying to go to this place. So let's say they want to go to the Walmart that's inside Raytown, and then you guys decide to make your Raytown zone 0 fare. At that point, the person on the phone would say, okay, you'll be picked up at this time, and the place you need to go to, you need to walk down the block to this virtual stop. And then a vehicle will come and pick you up, and they will drop you off at the virtual stop by Walmart. So this person would then walk to that zone and get picked up, and because they're staying within Raytown, they wouldn't be charged a fare. And then as they're driving towards Walmart, because it's an Uber Pool-like service, the vehicle may stop to pick somebody else up as well. Very similar to how the Raytown Flex works right now. So then they would drive to the Walmart and they would be dropped off. Those high priority places like that, typically we just put the virtual stop right in front of the door and they would go into the Walmart. And that would be the end of the trip. If they wanted to go to the Walmart that was at Blue Ridge Crossing in KCMO, they would then be crossing the border, so you will, into a different zone, at which point the person on the phone would say, okay, you're crossing a zone, that means your fare is going to be $4. And they would need to, when they go to the vehicle, they would need to have $4 to pay the operator of that vehicle.
Okay, so just to get this in my head too, so when I was a young child, my grandmother and I would ride the bus to Kansas City. And even if it was all in Kansas City, if you get on board that bus and you pay your fee, your fare, and then you would go to a certain point and have to transfer a different bus, you would then have to either have a transfer coin, because you've already paid for the whole trip, or you'd have to put in money for the rest of that trip. Is that similar?
So there wouldn't be a transfer point in this specifically. You'd be in the same vehicle the entire time you're transferring across zones. So you wouldn't
It would be similar, because you would be
yeah,
ahead of time, but you would.
yeah, you would know ahead of time that you're crossing a zone, so you know that your fare is going to be $4.
Gotcha.
And Mayor, let me clarify. The Flex right now doesn't take riders too far outside of Raytown city limits. Doesn't go into Brookside for doctor's appointments, things of that nature. Our riders do, however, sometimes will take the Flex to the nearest bus stop and find the right connecting bus stop. We're not eliminating that option. Matter of fact, one of the features is that if you were taking the Iris to a bus stop to go to Lee Summit, if you can catch the Lee Summit Express, then you will have no fare charged to you to ride that bus to the Lee Summit.
You're right.
You beat me to my next.
I left that off. I apologize.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So we've also built transfer points specifically, so places where multiple buses meet or high bus capacity stops. And the idea is to encourage people to still use the fixed routes, because the whole point of IRIS is to not replace fixed route. It is to supplement fixed route buses. IRIS cannot do what our fixed route does. And so if you were to take IRIS to one of those transfer points, then no matter where it is, even if it's across the border into KCMO, that is a zero fare ride. Thank you. I apologize. I forgot to mention that part.
So to give you an example, Bannister area has a transfer point. If someone is wanting to travel further west into Kansas City, they could take Iris to the Bannister transfer point and then go there to Waldo or somewhere like that. Also, to come back to Alderman Williams' question, one of the complaints we've had about Flex is a lot of people have their doctor's appointments scheduled between 10 and 2:30. We're not able to get them to those right now on Flex because those are our off hours. Iris will have, if you book accordingly, the availability to run you during those hours, especially if you go from doctor to doctor, you have the availability within that lunch hour time to do that.
Okay, anybody got any other questions before we move? Bill Van Buskirk, of course.
I may have another question as we go deeper into this.
Right.
Sure.
Already do, in fact, but I won't get into those yet. But you said there were 2 other cities that are participating in this now, is that correct? Or will be?
3 actually, outside of KCMO. So the 3 cities besides KCMO who are participating are Liberty, Gladstone, and Riverside.
Okay. And what are their, and you mentioned the fees that they're charging. It
So,
varies per
yeah.
city, right?
Mhm.
Now, this 84,000 per year, is that based on what? If we have fees outside of Raytown, will that affect that 84,000?
It would not.
If we have 0 fees in Raytown?
It would not affect that.
That won't affect it. What about if we had fees in Raytown? Would that affect it?
So part of the agreement is that any fares collected, if you were to choose to have an internal Raytown fare, is that fare goes back to the KCATA to pay against the KCMO contract. That's part of our agreement with our ability to expand this outside of KCMO in that contract.
Okay, so this is a yearly fee, right?
Yes, that's an annual fee of $84,000.
Annual fee, and it would start, you said,
It would start July 1.
July, okay. Yeah, one of the problems, as Missy stated, the flex service is very, very limited for people now. And Alderman Walters was talking about going to Blue Springs or Lee Summit or other communities. The flex doesn't do that.
Flex does not do that.
No. It's pretty much within Raytown and a little bit into Kansas City at both ends. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Buskirk. Ms. Creedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No, Ms. Creedy.
I'm sorry.
I just have a question as to how you arrived at the cost. Is it based on per capita, the geographic square miles, ridership, or a combination of all those factors?
It's roughly about half the cost of a vehicle to be on the road for the time. So if you guys were to pay for your own vehicle and have it be completely separate from the KCMO contract, that would be about $15,000. So because we're using latent capacity, we're not adding actual physical vehicles to the on the road to the service. That's where the $7,000 comes from as a sort of compromise, if you will, to help bring down the cost back to the KCMO contract. Because then the reason we're able to provide this is because the KCMO contract allows for us to expand the service to other communities as long as it doesn't interfere with the capacity for KCMO riders.
Thank you.
Mr. Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's hard to imagine that one size fits all or and trying to compare these, what's going to make the most people happy. Mm-hmm. And for me personally, it's not the money, but I guess the things that weigh heaviest for me is 7 days a week. It also has the widest range. I feel a little precarious trying to make someone else mind up for them what they need and what we're going to give them. But I know we have to do that. I guess the one question I have that we haven't talked about is, do both services have the same conditions on weather, like when they run or don't run, or how would people know if their ride might be canceled? They just call them? How's that work?
If a ride were to be canceled, like say due to weather, the app's going to send you a notification that your ride has been canceled. We've generally not had this. I mean, it was a fairly mild winter, but we really only had one day where Iris couldn't operate, and it was that morning in, I believe, February, where it was really icy. We had issues, but generally, if a ride has to get canceled for some reason, it's going to send a notification to the app on this person's phone to let them know.
So if they schedule a ride and where they're going cancels business that day, they're not, is there any penalty for that for them?
No, there wouldn't be any way for us to know if a business closes for the day. We wouldn't, unfortunately, have any way to.
I know this is a little off the subject, but I've had that question asked before, so I just wanted to personally know that.
That's a really interesting idea. I might go back and explore, see if there's a way you can integrate with business hours or an option there.
So I don't know if this is appropriate, but I'd just like to get your opinion. What do you think the best service is? I mean, overall, knowing you're the one that do most of the research on it, would meet the needs of most of the people.
To be honest, I can't, because one is operated by our staff and one is a contracted service, I cannot offer a recommendation. I can only say the differences.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else got anything? Because we got 20
Yes,
minutes
sir.
to go into the other part of what we need to discuss.
I have one. And then I'm
Ms.
done.
Bims.
And then I'm done. Thank you. I know my back, to me, is up against the wall because I look at a lot of people that do use this service. Well, I'm a devil's advocate. What if I said no for this tonight? What does that do to our area of people that really use it, or if they felt like they wasn't benefiting from it?
If the Board of Aldermen tonight were to decide to not go forward with either option or give staff recommendation for either option, we would prepare the flex to retire, and we would also not implement Iris. And I would be disappointed. I'm a big advocate for transit. I would hate to lose any kind of service in Raytown. But that's what, as the agency, what we would have to do is.
I'm just asking as just an advocate of something that came to me. But I know that the need is here. So I can't say no, but I'm just asking because where would that put them when they need it? And knowing that, some of it is going to be like the cost or whatever, and I'm sure that the families are going to have to work that out. So I'm just throwing that out there so that you all know it. Because then when it comes back to all of us, why did you do this? But also I know there's a lot of people that need it. Plus, I've used it myself, and I can tell you that I wasn't pleased because I really was. And I went down, no, seriously, I went down and connected from here down to University Health.
Okay.
So I'm just saying it was beneficial for me at the time because I couldn't drive. And even though I knew what the cost was doing this, I'm just saying, what if? Because that's going to come back, and some people, let me do this. I know you can't please everybody. So I'm just saying what we have to do. We know what we have to do. And I just wanted you to be able to have those responses. Because I'm going to say what I need to say, but I just want you to be aware of it. So I have been pleased. I just got to tell my colleague I'm going to do it again. So just to see where the connections are for me on these appointments. Because on some of these appointments, for tenured people, seasoned people like myself, those connections is very important along with having 2 and 3 appointments a day. So I just wanted to share that with you so that you know, and I have experienced it personally, so I wanted to make sure you all know it. And I think we need to start listening or talking to those seniors that's using it so that we can best give them what it is they need. That's all I'm saying.
Mr. Walters?
Yes, real quickly, did you tell me it was 1,700 riders were participating in Flex?
Per quarter, in the fourth quarter of 2023, I believe the number was around 1,700
Okay, fourth quarter of this year?
Used the flex zone in Raytown.
Or fourth quarter of 23?
23,
Okay.
yes.
And we're not, the Flex is really not, I mean, given the difference in the price, you really don't even want to consider it, I would think. You're phasing it out, as from what I understand, if I read this correctly.
So KCATA is retiring all the flexes inside their city, including the 30% part of your guys' flex, which if you guys were to choose to, you are more than welcome to keep it and keep the zone, change the zone if you would like to. But KCATA is choosing to retire flex in favor of using the IRS service.
Or just give us the vehicles and we could try it on our own?
There are some federal reasons I don't think we could do that.
Okay. And the IRIS program is limited to Gladstone, Riverside, and Liberty. Okay, that's all I really need to know at this time. The other question is, you don't need an answer tonight, do you?
No.
Okay,
Just-
good,
just
because I was going to say
discussion.
that there's a lot of information here.
Yeah.
You'll go out and
The only
it's
thing-
taken enough time.
The only thing I need direction to bring back to the KCATA tonight is a general feeling of the flex versus the IRIS, because next week is when we have to turn things in for the third quarter markup. That's kind of our deadline. So that's the one thing we kind of, the other things on here can kind of wait, but that's the one that kind of I need to have direction.
And Mr. Mayor, I need to clarify, it's not limited just to Liberty, Gladstone, and Riverside. It's all of Kansas City, Missouri as well. And right now, our flex doesn't even take you to the airport. So this would also give you the opportunity for $10 to go to the airport. So I just want to clarify that, because I think there might have been a misunderstanding. We were limiting you only
think
to
there was.
certain Northland communities. It is all of Kansas City plus those communities and the airport.
So we now have 15 minutes, so let's get on to the other part. Thank you for your clarity on that. I appreciate that very much. What else do you have for us?
So Alderman Walters was trying to jump ahead of me a little bit because he wanted to talk about the riderships that are fixed routes. Those are the buses that are coming out of Kansas City or other communities and riding through Raytown and stopping at certain stops. Currently, we do have Route 28, 29, and 63. This year is the first year that your contract required the city of Raytown to pay some portion of that. And working with Bryce, we were able to negotiate a fixed amount for the flex and those fixed routes, but only through June of this year. So as we're talking about the contract for what you want for your on-demand service, we also need to talk about the fixed routes that are running along Blue Ridge. That would be the maps that I believe Alderman Walters kept referring to earlier. So you're right now being quoted a price per what ATA and Kansas City, Missouri have negotiated for their fixed routes throughout the community. And we are paying for our portion is what they're asking us to do for the miles and the time that they spend running those buses through Raytown. So for 28, which has the greatest percentage of ridership in Raytown because it stops the most frequent times and comes back through Raytown the most frequent times, they're quoting for us a $76,892 fee for July 1st through October of 2025. That is our cost after the federal and state benefits that ATA is able to negotiate for us is deducted. So it costs more to operate that, but they're applying all of that to us, and it's still also assuming a zero fare. So you can ride that bus at no charge if you are a Raytown resident riding those buses and getting in on those stops. The next one is 29. I'm not quoting you a price because I learned today that right now ATA and Kansas City, Missouri are in discussions about the future of 29. So a price quote is not reasonable for us right now because there is the possibility it could change completely. This is what they call more of an express. So it only stops a few times on Blue Ridge, and then instead of going on up 51st Street to Blue Ridge over to Blue Ridge Crossing, it literally stops at 57th? Yeah, 57th, and then heads straight to downtown Kansas City, Missouri. It is our lowest ridership bus of numbers for the last, well, actually for the last year for certain, but last 2 quarters of that altogether. And again, it is more of an express. It's going to get you there faster, but it's only stopping a few times. It only comes through Raytown 6 times a day. So there's basically the early mornings and the late afternoons because it would be more of a work transportation option, but it has the same stops as 28. 28 just picks up more frequently for those who, and comes back through Raytown a lot more frequently. So I'm trying to give you the comparisons, but they're not giving us a price to maintain 29 because it's an unknown future for the rest of the year. And we're at the mercy of KCMO negotiating. So as we've seen on the flex, we could be in a similar situation depending on how their negotiations go. Then we have Route 63, which most of us are familiar with, that picks up right there, right outside of Sutherland's and right outside of Quick Trip, that portion of Blue Ridge. And then it takes the riders and goes into Kansas City, the Brookside area. We're being asked to consider paying $41,707 for a little piece of Blue Ridge for riders to commute into the western portion, so what I call southwest portion of Kansas City. So again, the calculation is based on your time in Raytown, the miles in Raytown, and applying all federal and state funds to reduce it down to the $41,707 and a 0 fare ridership there. I have given you on your next page a summary, so you didn't have to follow those numbers individually there. I was trying to give you calculations. If you were to assume that you wanted to maintain the flex instead of the iris, the first column shows you the annual. The second column is for the contract term I'm trying to negotiate. So we lock it in for the rest of this fiscal year and all of next fiscal year. So we would write the contract in a way, subject to approval with budget and all of that, you would be locking in a price. Because we're trying to lock in the price because, as you can tell, Kansas City, Missouri keeps going back and renegotiating prices on us, and we're trying to lock it in so that we at least have 16 months of known cost. And we are constantly every 6 months trying to renegotiate something. So your first line is the flex and flex only. If you were to offer your residents only to transport them within the city limits of Raytown, your cost would be for that 16-month contract period, $165,008. Now, if you were to offer them just Route 28, which is running your border of Kansas City and Raytown, that cost for your same period of time would be $102,480. Route 63, same contract period, and you're offering nothing else but Route 63, it's the $55,616. And then the iris, as he quoted to you, that price for the full 16-month period would be the $112,000. That's each individual piece of it. Now we'll go back to Alderman Walter's question of, well, what does it cost if we put things back together again? So I'm going to try to summarize that for you on the next page, which is talking about option A versus option B. Option A is if you fund just your flex and no fixed, and you let Kansas City basically run the buses through our part of the city with the doors closed. So if somebody wants to be on one of those routes, they're going to have to walk to the Kansas City bus stop to catch that bus, and they'll ride through Raytown with the doors closed. This has been done. North Kansas City took that option several months ago. There are other communities who have taken the same position to let Kansas City run through their city with the doors closed on the buses, so their residents have to go outside of their city to catch those buses and get from point A to point B, but not within their own city limits. I'm not proposing that, but I'm just giving you that option because I need you to have all facts as you're considering what could be or could not be considered. So then option B is if you decided to do an iris and then add the 28 with that so that you're trying to give your residents the most expanded variety, I would say, for transportation. And the reason I'm not giving you 63 on top of that is because we have close enough stops that they could take the iris to one of the stops for 63 right on the Raytown border and then take 63 on into Kansas City, Missouri at no cost. So we don't have that same offer for 28. If you decide to let the doors run, they're going to have to go a little bit further south of Raytown or a little bit further north of Raytown to catch a bus that takes them the same direction. So I'm trying to give you opportunities for consideration, and that's how the numbers come up for a 16-month contract. So I know that's a lot of information, and I'll start taking the questions.
Bill Van Busker.
Thank you. Okay, they're saying they'll go through Raytown with the doors closed if we don't.
If our contract says that on the fixed routes, you are not wanting to pay for any one of those 2 routes.
Now, is that only if it's a zero fee?
At this current time,
Will they still go through Raytown with closed doors?
Yes.
If the riders are going to pay a fee?
at this current time, they're not offering the riders a fee option on the fixed routes. Right now, ATA is saying it's still a 0 fare.
Is it 0 fare for everybody that rides those? In all through Kansas City?
Yes, sir.
0 fare.
Yes, sir.
Well, I don't like what they're offering at all, and I don't think anyone here should. It's not beneficial to our city, to our citizens. It's going to be very costly if we pay for all of these routes. We're talking about in excess of $200,000. Even if we go to the, even if we utilize the new service rather than the flex, and we pay Kansas City what they're demanding for those other routes, which just border, one of them borders Raytown on Blue Ridge and Blue Ridge Cutoff. In fact, portions of that are in, Raytown is on one side of Blue Ridge for part of that. It's on the other side for a portion of that. I think it's about 75th Street where it crosses over. And it just runs along the edge of Raytown. But it's certainly, and the other one that comes up to 63rd just barely touches Raytown, the services Raytown even. I like the Iris portion of this, but even if we choose that and we pay to utilize the other 2 fixed routes or other 3 fixed routes or whatever the case might be, it's going to be in excess of $200,000 per year, it looks like, which is a lot more than, the problem with the flex thing has been that we went ahead and we've done it because there's a need for especially senior citizens and, people who don't have transportation necessarily, that they can utilize themselves. It's been beneficial, even though the cost has went up a lot every year. They used to provide more service for less money. Now they provide less service for more money. That's what I'm talking about, the flex route. And so, but it's the best we had to offer for our citizens to provide something. Because certainly it's not a majority of our citizens that utilize that in any way, shape, or form. It's just a small portion of our citizens that utilize it, but people haven't had a problem providing that, and even though it's been costly. I think this Iris option is a lot better option than the Flex option, certainly. I would definitely have a problem meeting Kansas City's demands it's ridiculous that they're going to drive that route and not pick up riders. You know, but, you know, that didn't say a lot for, for Kansas City, for KCATA, Kansas City Area Transit Authority. I'm sorry, but it just doesn't. But, so I would not favor anything other than the Iris option. I think it's a lot better option. It provides a lot more service for our citizens that they don't have now with the flex routes. And like you said, they can go to the airport, they can, you know, they can go to other areas. Certainly that's, you know, that's big. They can go into Kansas City, anywhere into Kansas City. So that would give them that option. If they have, and people who maybe have been utilizing that, the fixed route would have the availability of the Iris to utilize. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, they would. There's just a little bit of a glitch. Let me clarify this. As you know, with a fixed route, you have a certain time the bus is always going to be there. And so those people who are on a very rigid routine, time-wise, you know, that's the only option that they have. I just expressed that because I don't want to mislead somebody that the Iris is going to be exactly as rigid as a fixed bus route is going to be. That's the only thing.
The Flex
So-
hasn't been either.
Right.
That's certainly. But,
Right.
Okay.
yeah, you know, they're still going to keep, Kansas City buses are still going to basically pretty much keep their schedule. They may pick up a little bit by not having to stop at the few bus stops they have through next to Raytown, but isn't going to change much. Thank you.
Mr. Myers.
Okay, so from the cynical point of view, this might be a question for Michael. How much is the transportation sales tax generating annually? And with this going up, 300% from what we're paying currently for bus service, is this going to bleed us dry?
If you're going to answer, please come forward so we can hear you.
I'm looking 5-10 years in the future.
Yeah, annually, the sales tax itself, receives $1.6 million annually. That's to cover all the expenses within the transportation area, which is heavy facility. In addition to this, so this thing doubles or triples itself this way, it diminishes down. And you'll see in the 6-month report I'm coming up with, the fund balance itself is something to really consider too, as the costs go up on this.
And then for transportation, that we use that primarily for street maintenance or CapEx?
It's been a combination with mostly for street maintenance. The past 2 years, that's what's paid for your overlay, your MAQS. Like last year, we did those 2 applications. That's what's come out, transportation sales tax.
So that's something to keep in mind is.
Along with your salt for your snow.
Gotta have salt. So if we're gonna pay more for this, we're gonna pay less for asphalt, which we desperately need. So there's the happy medium's got a very tight margin on this one. And really, I understand it going to the zero fare, but when Kansas City pushes that, it's kind of like what Bill says, you know, and nothing's ever free. Somebody's got to pony up and pay for it, and unfortunately, they kind of have us by the, you know what I mean? So out of all of it, I'm good with Iris. I think Flex is dead on arrival for me. The Iris, the Flex is, and then I hate taking away a fixed bus service, but if the Iris will take you to a transfer point and you can ride there for free, so it makes sense in my head. Just go with the Iris and just nix the fixed bus service.
I think he's got an answer to what you just said.
So, sorry. If I may interject regarding to the fixed route services.
Thank you, Michael.
So it's first pointing out the Iris could not handle the capacity that the 28 currently does. That is picked up in and out of Raytown. So I do understand that price point. If you were hate to, because we gave this a la carte. I would strongly advocate if you were to pay for a fixed route, for it to be the 28. That is your most important bus that picks up most of your citizens and connects them the most with our other routes. I know it's a lot of cost. The way this has been working is with these enclave communities, is that if an enclave community, for example, first correction, sorry, Missy, it was Gladstone that chose not to pay anymore. Basically, if a community chooses, an enclave community chooses not to pay for a fixed route, the cost gets incurred by the primary holder of that route contract, basically, which would be KCMO, in every instance currently in the area. And they kind of get the discretion of whether or not they want to stop and pick up citizens in that area. So far, KCMO with Gladstone chose they didn't wish to pick up people within Gladstone because they want their funds to go towards their citizens.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah, let me stop everybody just a minute. Okay, we are now, it's all been quick questions, but we're past our time to start our other meeting. Would it not be, because I've got a lot of lights flashing up here, would it not make sense at this point to have another session on this, the next meeting? And everybody, now that we've had this presentation, we can get some more answers at that point, and maybe that you guys can come up with, now that you've heard some of the questions, you guys can try to be better prepared to give us exact answers on what these guys are talking about and what might.
When would your next meeting be?
It'd be the
21st
21st.
of May. And if I could ask that the questions be emailed to me, so then we can start doing more research instead of trying to answer these on the fly and we haven't had time to pull the data, that would be helpful.
That was gonna be my next suggestion, because that way everybody's got the questions researched and ready to go, and I think it'd be better suited to be answered that way. Can you?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not committing anyone tonight, but if we could just see a raise of hands of those who are leaning more towards an iris.
Hang on a second, I
sorry.
got a lot of voices up here, please, people.
I'm sorry.
Say it again.
If we could just see a raise of hands of those who are leaning more towards the iris or more towards the flex, that would help Bryce a little bit more as he's trying to prepare for negotiations with his board.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why not, just, yeah. So just between iris and flex, who would rather have the iris? What about the flex? There you go. So. You want to turn on your microphone?
Do what Missy had suggested, we need to be cautious not to send those emails to the whole
Yes.
board. That would be an ethics violation, and we want to make sure we don't do that.
Yes, I think that would go out with the email like I usually do to let people know that.
Thank you,
Mr.
thank
Mayor,
you.
Yeah.
They also
That's why we asked for the raise of hands if you're leaning more towards an iris or a flex. That's what that's about.
Then
So-
they can put something together for us so the next time we can make better use, because we won't be going over the other part of it. So at this point, we're going well into our past our 7 o'clock hour for our meeting. So let's just send those separately to Missy, and she'll get the information we need, and then when we come back the 21st, we'll have another work session, and we should have all of the answers by that point. So, do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
By Mr. Myers, second by Mr. Azier. Let's do it by affirmation. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone against? All right, we are adjourned at 7:08, and be back in here in 5 minutes.